I suck at sleeping. Insomnia. So, uh, it's like 2:30 right now. I've already slept something like 6 hours. But I only slept 3 hours the night before, so I feel like exhausted still, but I can't sleep. So I must record something instead, and probably just be one of these rambles, I don't have a topic in mind particularly, other than just the sort of usual, existence is so horrible thing, right? Although I'd like to move away from that somewhat, if I can. Of course, everyone would, right? No one wants to live in a world that warrants complaining about it at all times, at any given opportunity. I know I certainly don't express that, I suppose. That overall my desire would be to have never been at all. That there's really no world that would justify being brought into. I suppose, as usual, these last few days, that, or just, as is the trend, I suppose, the general trend for this time in my existence, I'm really incredibly preoccupied with aging and the passing of time. I really dislike the fact that I'm aging. I'm sure everyone does, right, to some extent, but it's really weighing on me much more than I guess, let on to people around me. Much more than also people around me would expect of me, given I guess, what they take to be my general outlook on things, and just the overall way that I conduct myself in life. They would think, as I understand it at least, that I would be very much unfazed by the whole affair, very nonchalant. And I certainly thought I would be too. But it's, as always, right, it's very difficult to, in almost every case, anticipate how one will react to a given state of affairs when actually confronted with them. What is the, saying, right? I hope it's not, I hope I'm not, lifting this from Joe Rogan or something. Fucking hell. I don't want to be the kind of guy that quotes Joe Rogan. But in any case, it's, everyone's got a plan until they're punched in the face. And, it definitely applies to me in this circumstance here, right, with aging. I thought I would deal with it in a certain way. It just wouldn't, it would be a non-thing to me, right? I wouldn't have to deal with it at all. But I suppose we're so long in this. I mean, when you're in this period of youth, right, it feels like an eternity, and you don't really notice any signs of aging or deterioration upon yourself at all, and you kind of feel that the fact that such is actually an inevitability and not just a possibility, that it's 100% going to happen to you, that you are going to age, decay, die, become diseased, and so on. It all just seems like an abstraction and not something that's really a realistic possibility until it happens, right? And then we begin to see what kind of person one begins to see what kind of person they really are, right? The true character is revealed. The behavior always tells the true story about what a person is, not what the person says. And it's kind of very confronting, right? To see what kind of person one actually is, what one really believes. Oftentimes that kind of discrepancy can be so vast that it leads to a trauma of sorts, right? Because it's so horrifying, really, to discover that someone is really not who they thought that they were. That there's almost as if there's someone else inhabiting them, and they are observing this imposter. Same thing has happened to me before when I've been confronted with death. I haven't taken it well. I've made kind of a fool of myself, to be honest. I've just been I was just a wreck, really. I did not handle it well at all. But the aging thing really is just consuming me. And it's bringing up all sorts of other questions about identity and what kind of life I ought to really be living, or what life I want to be living, and how I'm going to move on from this, and the things that I'm ultimately going to have to abandon in order to move on from this. And that once I do move on from this, then certain doors are going to be by necessity irrecoverably closed, never to be opened again for this particular body, this particular mind, in this particular life. in this particular world. And I think perhaps that's one of the most difficult things that I'm wrestling with. It may, in a sense, be the very core issue, the epitomization of what I'm dealing with here. The time I have is something that's only moving forwards, and the more time that I spend lamenting that, the more time that slips by me. Further and further I get away from being able to do I don't know what, the less able I am to do I don't know what. Less and less able all the time. It's very uncomfortable to see what's happening to me. I mean, I see this as being a common theme, right? It's just something that human beings have to wrestle with, right? With aging, that the person that one sees in the mirror resembles less and less. With the passing of time, the person that one takes themselves to be that there's no longer any symmetry, I suppose, between those two things. But I don't like it at all. And I don't like the way that people treat me also because of it. That I get treated a certain way because of the way that I look. I mean, yeah, as I said already, it's all just part of the human condition, right? That people have to deal with these things, and yeah, it fucking sucks. of myself, I get treated like, I don't know, I'm dangerous, or I'm a criminal or something like this, right? Because I'm, I don't know, a big person. Not like big as in fat, but tall. I have a large frame. Obviously, I'm male, right? So obviously I'm, a rapist in waiting. And I'm inherently violent, right? I'm just waiting to commit grievous acts of harm, right? Of violence at a moment's notice, right? I just need an excuse, right? And because of, these things and the fact that I'm autistic, people, they don't know that I'm autistic, right? But they sense that there's something off about my behavior, my mannerisms, right? It triggers that whole uncanny valley thing, right? That's where I am. That's where I reside in these people's minds. People that observe me in public and so on. And because things don't add up and things don't make sense to them about who I am or what I'm doing, right? Inevitably, as humans have a negativity bias, they conclude that I must be up to no good. And so I've had all sorts of shit happen as a result of this, like the amount of times I've been stopped and searched by police in public for just doing absolutely nothing is way more than the average person. Way more. The police have taken me to be a criminal that they're looking for, or a criminal who's done like pretty heinous things, usually. And just recently I had someone call the owner of a field or area of fields or whatever, because I was walking in them, and they thought that I was like, I don't know what they thought. And the owner came up to me and confronted me and asked me what I was doing there, and I was like, I'm just taking a walk. And I guess he could see how ridiculous the situation was when he actually spoke to me. This is the thing, is when I can actually speak to people, right? Look people in the eye, and I don't know, my features begin to be animated, and thus like banishing the sort of resting bitch face that I usually have. As this is a problem as well, right? Having a resting bitch face coupled with all the other various physical attributes, right? But once I can actually talk to people, they'll see what kind of person I am. They'll look into my eyes, right, particularly. And they'll know that I'm not this horrible person that they think I'm going to be. It is problematic, though, how we kind of get forced into these roles and modes of behavior by our environment. Specifically, I'm thinking about here how the way in which others perceive you to a very large extent determines how you're ultimately going to behave. So what I mean by that is that people can assume the worst about you, right, based on physical attributes and so on, and just eccentric, idiosyncratic behavior in the case of autism, for me, right? And they make all these assumptions, right, and they treat you in accordance with such. And because they treat you in this sort of subpar way, right, with this sort of aloofness or hostility, condescension, kind of arrogance, right? Well, what I'm saying is it's very difficult to treat people well and nicely who are consistently treating you in the inverse manner, so negatively. You can fight against it for a while, right? On a good day, you can fight against it. You've had enough sleep, you're well nourished, the sun is out, and you can fight against it, but in less than optimal conditions, it's much harder, and you're going to, in some way at least, if not on a particularly bad day entirely, be exactly the person that they expect you to be. And unfortunately, over a long enough timeline, what seems to happen is that more and more of this is internalized, or just becomes rather the default way in which one conducts themselves in relation to others. One becomes the monster that they always took them to be. It's a large part of why perhaps now I like to be alone so much, so I don't have to deal with this. I can be the person that I know I actually am. I mean, that's an incredibly dubious thing, right? With this whole anattā, no self concept that I kind of largely adhere to. But nonetheless, for the sake of this particular discussion, let's forget about that, at least somewhat. So yeah, in private, I can reside in that sense of being who I am, and not feel forced into these roles, right? And to come back to the earlier point of aging, I kind of feel like that's what's happening when I see myself in the mirror, say, right? When I see the person that I'm becoming physically, I feel like I'm being forced into a role, right? The same way as with my behavior when I interact with others. And of course, they also perceive me to be this certain thing, right? Based on my physical characteristics, based on my aging. And I'm forced into a role then also to behave in a certain way, to feel a certain way about myself. And this comes to me when I look in the mirror. Feel this incredible sense of resistance. I don't want to be that. That isn't me. And I suppose that, yeah, as I said, this feels it's very confronting to see how I feel about this, because I pay so much lip service to these Buddhist ideas. As I just said, this anattā, no self concept, there really is no core essence of what a person is. And it's not just lip service. I do perceive something of this. It is something of my own lived experience, but the acuity of the pain, the discomfort that I feel herein on this matter of aging just trumps all of that. Just the discomfort, the pain, the, I guess, dysphoria, if you will, just occupies way more mental space. It has way more gravity to it than the perception of any kind of I guess of seeing, as the Buddhists would say, of seeing reality correctly as it really is. And this is all right when, this is what the Dharma is really for, right? It's for just this thing, just these issues. It's very easy to peg oneself as being this wise, enlightened person when everything's going swimmingly and they're just contemplating these matters from a distance. But then very different when shit is for real. Yeah, like I said with that quote, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Everyone's a sage until they start balding, right? That's suddenly happening to me. Balding. It's not even the balding that bothers me. It bothers me, but it doesn't bother me for the reasons that I guess would be typical. It's more just that I've never really been particularly identified with masculinity, and so this balding thing is it's a product of masculinization, and so were I more aligned with my masculinity, I wouldn't have an issue with just, what's occurring. But it's the fact that I'm not, and so there's just this more, it's just very uncomfortable. It forces me to again, it's just this ever widening gulf between how I internally feel myself to be and how I actually appear to be. That's the issue. And there are just layers to it. And this is just somewhat of an atypical layer. I'm sure I'll find a way to move past this though. Admittedly, I feel like I'm being I guess I'm indulging it, I think. Or maybe I'm just fully processing how I feel. I don't know. Hard to say. I would be lying if I didn't, if I didn't acknowledge the fact that there's certainly a lot of external societal pressure to just not process one's feelings on particular matters, and so one is sort of in turn shamed for doing so if they in fact do so, and will be said to be indulging in, I guess, self-pity, right? So me saying that I'm doing such is just perhaps an internalization of this. So much of what we do is an internalization of these societal expectations. And it's also subconscious and intertwined with what we believe to be our own intrinsic motivations for doing things. And maybe that's all that we are, right? Harkening back to this anattā concept. For instance, this issue of aging, of taking such issue with it, could be the same thing. An internalization of a societal expectation. So much emphasis and importance is placed upon youth, and to not be young, to be aging, one is losing perhaps the most valuable resource, right? They're becoming less and less fit of a worker, less able to contribute, less able to capitalize upon what their body is capable of doing. Hard to think, though, still, that anyone would be entirely comfortable with seeing their life slip between their fingers in real time. Irrespective of societal expectations. All peoples at all times had some story to live by. It just so happens that in this current society at this time, it's not one that is favorable to the aging process. In other cultures at other times, in other societies, it very well may have been, and most probably certainly was. But yeah, as I said, I'm sure I'll find a way to move beyond this. Or I won't. Either way, there's nothing I can do to stop what has already been in motion for my entire life. There was never anything that I really could have done. And even if I had tried to take action in some way, like so many people do, still only temporarily and only superficially changes things. The underlying process which is driving the whole thing is wholly unheeded and proceeds with the same degree of momentum as it was proceeding before any and all intervention. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to say for now. Probably try and get some sleep or maybe even go for a walk or something. I hope you're well, whoever is listening to this. Thanks for listening if you made it this far. Alright, goodbye.